Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Monster's webinar on quiet quitting versus setting boundaries. Since the term quiet quitting went viral, it's been defined and redefined by media and employees alike. Some believe that it's mentally checking out of work, while others agree with one TikTok user who has over 10,000 followers who says, you're still performing your duties, but you are no longer subscribing to that hustle culture. Work does not have to be life. This begs the question, when did setting work-life boundaries become a form of quitting? Leading today's conversation is Claire Barnes. Claire has been at Monster since 2018 and was recently named Chief Human Capital Officer, and she leads our global human resources strategy. With more than 20 years of experience working in communications, tech, and information services, Claire has played a leading role in human capital planning for brands such as Verizon and Thomson Reuters. She is passionate about equality, engagement, and leading successful and effective teams. Claire is based in the UK, and with that, I will hand it over to Claire to lead our conversation today. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Meg, and hello from the UK. It's 6 o'clock in the evening here, so it's probably going to get dark beside me, so bear with me on the light. Thank you very much to everybody who's joining today or who's listening to the recording. I'm really excited to be here to talk about this extremely hot topic. Meg already talked a bit about the fact that this term quiet quitting has gone viral, and I think you'd have to have been hiding under a rock or whiling away your time on a desert island not to have heard of it, either in the news or social media over the past few months. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it really means to quiet quit, the different schools of thought, which Meg talked about, and really understanding when did it become such an issue to set work-life boundaries? When did that become a form of quitting? So we're going to look at things like generational work styles, whether or not quiet quitting is valid or new, and how companies can better support the mental health of their employees. So we're going to begin with a quick video on what really is quiet quitting. Meg, I can't hear it. I don't know if other people can hear it, but I can't hear it.
I think that's because I went on mute. Let's try again.
You have a job.
Yeah.
And you're stressed out about it.
Yes.
Introducing doing the bare minimum.
What's that?
Don't put extra effort into a job that doesn't care about you. Do just enough to not get fired.
Won't I get in trouble?
What are they going to do? Fire you? You kind of want that anyway.
We're gonna have to let you go. No, please. I love it here.
When you do the bare minimum, you can have loads more free time and still get paid the same amount.
You're my boss. I got it. Yeah. Yeah, I'll get right on that. It's my boss. It's after 5. They'll figure it out. My whole life, I was taught that extra effort at work will get recognized and rewarded. And that was the biggest lie I've ever heard. So now I do the bare minimum and everything's better.
Try it today. You have a job.
So we thought we would share that humorous video with you to talk about this concept of quiet quitting and one of the schools of thought around it. But many of you will have seen the viral video which went viral from Zaid Khan, who is the TikTok user who introduced us to this concept of quiet quitting. And he defines it as not outright quitting your job, but quitting the idea of going above and beyond. You haven't officially quit, you're still performing your duties, but you're not doing anything more. So basically you're doing essentially the bare minimum of what you were hired to do and no longer subscribing to this hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life. He further separates it in the video, he separates it, the two worlds of work and life, by saying that your worth as a person is not defined by your labor. One other expression that's been used, NPR expressed it as workaholism is out and coasting is in. Call it the work-life balance manifesto. So let's talk a little bit more about that. I've already mentioned to some, quiet quitting might look like a reasonable retreat from this round-the-clock hustle culture, but to others, it represents something completely different. It can mean quiet quitting is showing us disengaged employees who were sandbagging and shirking all but the minimum effort and not expecting and not even really caring that their employers might fire them for it. After all, many workers, myself included, have grown up in this world where hard work meant more hours. So I remember when I first started my career in HR, I worked for a startup in the UK, and it was common practice that we all got in at the same time as our boss. He got in very early in the morning, and we all waited until he left before we left. And it wasn't even that he said that, it was just the culture of our organization. And many of us will be familiar with the term or with the quote, which Elon Musk said, where he said, nobody ever changed the world on a 40-hour week. And this characterizes some of the expectation created by this hustle culture. Now, in front of you, you can see the results of a Gallup poll, and they show that the percentage of actively disengaged workers has increased significantly over previous years. So we're in a situation where we see disengagement really at an all-time high. Additionally, also in that Gallup report, we've also seen that at least half of Americans fit the description of quiet quitting. That's a very concerning statistic. And even if you look at the real exit rate, you can see it's 25% higher than it was before the pandemic. So it brings us to the question, why are people really quiet quitting? What's causing this to happen? So we're going to look at a couple of potential reasons, and also some of the reasons why people are actually quitting, which also helps us to shed some light on this. So first of all, as an HR professional, I'm sure many of you listening will have the same challenge that I have, which is that we remain in an incredibly tight labour market. Despite the fact we have recession fears, talent scarcity is a real problem for employers. Statistically, as it stands today, there are 2 job openings for every unemployed American. This means that employees today feel like they have the upper hand. They can see around them employers struggling to recruit and retain talent or individuals with the skills that they have. And this means their feeling of job security is higher than it might be on average. So they're more confident that they'll still have a job tomorrow, even if they do the bare minimum today. So that's one potential reason. The next reason is kind of on the flip side to this. I mentioned before that we know that there is increasing pressure on the economy. Now, we are seeing this start to affect the confidence of employees because they have increasing financial pressure on themselves and their families. 80% of job seekers say that inflation is already affecting their career decisions. And we know that the mortgage rate is already at a 14-year high. If we look at a new report that was released by House Canary, we can see that rent prices for single family homes swelled during the first half of this year, hitting a national average of just less than $2,500, which is a 13.4% increase compared to the same period in 2021. So it could be that as much as an employee might want to tender their resignation, they're not in a financial position to be able to do so. So here in front of you, you can see some information that I think it's really important to consider. It's always useful to understand why people are actually quitting. So we have our quiet quitters who may have their reasons for being in that state, but also why are people actually leaving their jobs? The data in front of you is from a survey by McKinsey, and it provides an overview of the top 10 reasons why individuals are leaving their jobs. The big circles on the left-hand side are the biggest reasons, going down to the smaller circles. So you can see some things that you would expect to see. For example, inadequate compensation, not being paid enough for their work, not being given career opportunities, or opportunity to develop in their jobs, the work expectations not meeting reality of their day-to-day, or not feeling like they have the support of others in the workplace. The one that we've highlighted here is not shocking, but is quite sad to see. So the third biggest reason for employees leaving is uncaring or uninspiring leaders. Now, we know that employees stay or leave an organisation because of their manager. In fact, in a Gallup survey into effective recruitment, that indicated that 70% of employee engagement is influenced by the manager. So given that we know that, it's really sad to see that that is the third highest reason why employees are leaving their jobs. So I'm going to take you back in time a little bit, and some of you may be familiar with the characters that you see in front of you. Is quiet quitting or uninspiring leaders and managers a new phenomenon? The answer to that question is no, it isn't. The pictures you can see in front of you are from the classic movie Office Space, which was released in 1999. Some of you may not have seen it. I'm sure you can find it on streaming services. But just to give you a bit of context here, on the left, we have Peter, who hates his soul-destroying job, and he is attending hypnotherapy sessions to relieve his work-related stress. Unfortunately, during one of those sessions, his therapist actually dies, and that leaves him in this blissful state of quiet quitting, which means he is refusing to work overtime or accept overtime requests that in the past his manager would always have expected him to accept. On the right-hand side, we see Joanna, Jennifer Aniston, who is a waitress at a chain restaurant. And she is being shamed here for only having the minimum of 15 pieces of flair on her uniform. I always feel when I say this that I have to kind of, for anyone who's British out there and listening to me, flair, we call them badges, but it's basically appreciation, I think, on her uniform. Essentially, these bosses are making their employees' lives miserable. And it highlights another harmful but not new trend, which we're hearing about, which is quiet firing. And I know before we started the webinar today, somebody submitted a question to ask, what is quiet firing? So I'm just going to talk about that for a moment. So quiet firing is where a manager treats employees so poorly that it gets to the point they would rather quit than waiting for the company to let them go. And it comes in many different forms. It could be they've been promised a pay rise for years and years and it's never come to fruition. It could be they have the work piled upon them, but then they've never given the resources or the support to actually get the work done. It could be that they're given vague and inconsistent feedback or measured against inconsistent or unfair performance standards. It could be that the manager shows favoritism or a lack of understanding to different workers with their different circumstances and priorities. Those who don't like the treatment are welcome to leave. And when you think about that third highest reason that we have for individuals resigning at work, you can see the correlation here between the importance of having caring, supportive, and inspiring managers in the workplace. So when did it become that passion and commitment for your job can only be demonstrated by taking on this additional work, by working more than 40 hours a week, and by wearing, in Joanna's case, 37 pieces of flair? Just for a minute, I'd like you to pause and think about the impact that that kind of thinking can have on the culture in the workplace. So what happens if you're an employee who can't work extra time or take on additional work outside of your standard hours? Does it mean you're not valued and you can't progress in your organization? When you think about inclusivity in the workplace, we know that women, and more so women of color, bear the higher burden of unpaid care outside of work. If we decide to judge people only based on the time that they're working and the number of hours they're putting in, we're at a high risk of excluding diverse groups in the workforce. And that brings us to another kind of elephant in the room, I guess, which is, what about the impact of stress and burnout here, given the fact we've just been through a pandemic and we know that burnout rates are at an all-time high? So here you can see the results of the Gallup State of the Workplace report, and they show that stress rates are at an all-time high. 44% of employees globally experienced more daily stress today than they felt previously. This rate is higher than during the pandemic. And when we look at that in more detail, just almost 6 out of 10 Americans over the age of 40 reported feeling daily stress, while just over 4 out of 10 younger Americans are feeling the same. Others worry that quiet quitting is too passive aggressive and it can't accomplish what workers really want, which is for the situation to get better or really for them to be able to leave. And it puts extra burden on co-workers. If we look at a recent article that ran in the Washington Post, it suggests the people who tend to experience the highest level of burnout, women and people of color, probably can't afford to quiet quit. So the next thing we want to look at is, what do we see when it comes to stress? Why is stress different when it comes to different generations? Rather than the millennials' hustle culture or grind culture, as you may know it, the younger workforce is taking the lead on drawing boundaries between work and life and contributing to lower reported stress in that age group, just like I just mentioned with the statistic there. So what do generational differences look like when it comes to work?
Hey, do you think you could stay a little late? We really need to make this deadline. Yeah, not happening. I gotta go pick up my kid from soccer practice. Ask a millennial though. They never say no. Can you relax? I just said I'm on. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Let me just go make a really quick phone call. Mom, it happened again. I tried to tell him no, he just wouldn't listen. Yeah, that's gonna be a hard pass. Not really into that kind of stuff. Thanks for the offer though. You are not gonna believe what my boss just asked me. I'm not.
So we see it as a bit of a comedic video, but I think we can all see some reality there in what we're seeing for the generational differences. The youngest generation is also the generation that is most likely to prefer splitting their time between working from home and being on site. And that's really demonstrating this continued desire to find balance between work and life. The older generations, and I say that not to offend because I include myself in that, has more of a first one in, last one out mentality when it comes to working in the office. And it goes back to that example I gave earlier on when I talked about being in before the boss, leaving after the boss. With the closure of many offices during the pandemic, productivity does need to be valued differently. And it can't be about being physically seen at your desk. So how do we measure productivity in this modern world? One of the things we are seeing, and at Monster, we poll our candidate database on a regular basis, but even now, post-pandemic, we're seeing that flexibility remains a really high priority for workers. In a survey that we ran earlier this year, we found that when it comes to flexibility, over half, which was 56% of those surveyed, of active job-seeking candidates prefer to work fully remote, yet only 19% of employers plan to offer it. And there are many debates on the good and bad of fully remote and hybrid working, which I'm sure we could do a whole other webinar on. So why is it we view productivity as the number of hours worked and not the actual work output? We see quiet quitting as potentially linked to performance. But actually, when you think about it, shouldn't not working overtime be seen as a sign of higher productivity? Because actually it's showing that people are managing their workloads in the time that they have, they're prioritizing what needs to be done, and then they're signing off on time at the end of the day. So let's keep that thought in our mind and now talk a little bit about what are things we can do to reduce the instances of quiet quitting in our own workplaces. Well, one of the things that I think is crucial is something that we focused on much more strongly over the past 2 years. So we've talked about this idea that quiet quitting could be seen as a way to draw boundaries and to create a better work-life balance. One of the things that we really focused on, I think, in many companies was well-being and making well-being a priority during the pandemic. In a recent Monster poll, 86% of respondents said that they prioritized well-being for themselves in the past 12 months, and 52% prioritized well-being at work. So it's clear that this is a priority for employees. And just ensuring that you keep that front and center when you think about the benefits that you're offering. And I'm not necessarily talking about expensive benefits, it could be fringe benefits here, but things like recharge days, or we call them self-care days at Monster, enable employees to take time off and also to understand that the company values well-being as part of the culture. The second example you have here is leadership and leading by example and showing appreciation. I cannot stress how important leadership is. I mean, we saw it on the reasons why individuals are leaving, but employees will stay or leave a company for a manager. Managers are the key to understanding engagement in an organization. They and the way that they treat and work with their employees is crucial. They need to lead by example, be caring, be inspiring. They don't have to be the most, they don't have to be the most extrovert person to be inspiring. It's all about being authentic and listening to your employees. But it's also about not expecting your employees to do something that you wouldn't do yourself, and also setting boundaries to help them in their own life. So for example, if you take time off as a manager. Don't be emailing employees or jumping on calls because they will think that's what's required of them when they take time off. So really think about ensuring that you are setting the right expectations with your employees. The other thing, which is really simple, when I say here show appreciation, it's so valued by employees when a manager says thank you for what they're doing. It doesn't have to be about financial reward. In Glassdoor's employee appreciation survey, 53% of people said that feeling more appreciation from their boss would help them stay longer at their company. So the lesson here is the more you can appreciate, the better. The third one we have is focus on development. Very sorry for my squeaky chair. Try not to move, but it's squeaking. If you can, prioritize development and upskilling. So we saw it in those top 10 reasons why employees resign. But we also found in one of our polls that 45% of workers would feel more valued and more likely to stay at a company if their employer offered reskilling or upskilling training. Now, I'm very aware this can sound like an expensive thing to have to do. It doesn't have to be about formal training. It can be coaching, can be on-the-job learning, working on projects, but it's about ensuring that the individual feels they're being developed and they have somewhere to grow in their company. The fourth one, create a purpose-led employer value proposition, or EVP. 70% of Gen Z workers say they want to work for companies whose values align with their own. So when you think about your employer value proposition and you think about your purpose, is that reflected in your culture? You know, is your culture what you think you want your culture to be? And is that culture reflected on your website, in the way that your policies operate, in the communication that you have with employees? So think about that purpose, or leading with purpose. And then last but not least, conduct stay interviews. So I say stay interviews. You don't have to call them stay interviews, but really this is about engaging with employees who you know are happy and are not quiet quitting, and asking them questions which can help you understand maybe why people are. So things like, how are they feeling about their job? Why do they feel happy? Are they fearful of anything? What more could you be doing to support them in the workplace? It also kind of comes back to that point about making sure you're listening to employees. So doing things like engagement surveys, regularly polling your employees is also really important, as long as you listen to what they're saying. So with that, I think I might have gone a little bit over, so I apologize for that. But I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me in this session. I hope you found it useful. And I am going to hand back over to Meg.
Hi, Claire. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I don't think any minds that we went a little bit over time here. We still have a lot of great questions to go through anyway. So we're going to see how many we can get through in the next few minutes here. Do you think that the quiet quitting trend is here to stay?
You know, it's a really good question. I don't think it's new as a phenomenon. I think it's something that's always been there. For me, it's really important, I mentioned it briefly, but to sort of separate quiet quitting from an expectation of performance based on the number of hours that you work. So is the individual really quiet quitting, or are they not working overtime? You know, what's going on here? I think with the recession, we probably will see changes in the labour market, or hopefully not recession, but changes of economic conditions. We probably will see changes in the labour market, which could reduce it, but I don't think it's going anywhere fast.
Wonderful. What should you do if you suspect someone in your company has quiet quit?
Talk to them is a good place to start. I think, you know, quiet quitting, we see it as this person going off and kind of hiding away, just doing the bare minimum and kind of getting away with it. I think having a conversation, a really open conversation with the individual and saying, you know, I've noticed that you seem a bit disconnected from work. How are you feeling? Is there anything happening that, you know, you'd like to share? Is there anything I could be doing better? Because it could be for any number of reasons that person is becoming a bit disengaged. It could be they're burnt out. It could be they have issues at home. It could be they're not feeling supported, or somebody's bullying them. There could be all kinds of reasons. So making sure you open the dialogue in a really safe way, I think, is the most important thing.
On that note, on the value of open and honest communication here, someone was asking about how you balance work responsibilities while still showing potential for promotion or raise. So how do you retain that balance, but still show and demonstrate that ambition?
Yeah, I think again, this is about output versus an activeness whilst you're working, right? I think there's this perception of quiet quitting that the individual is disengaging from kind of leaning in to wanting to grow at work. You can still want to grow at work, but work within a 40-hour week. You know, you just have to make sure you're leaning in the workplace. You're having conversations with your manager. You're taking the opportunity to train and develop. You know, you're taking the opportunities as they come. The fact that you kind of have to work within, or you want to work within a sort of limited time, shouldn't affect, you know. And Meg and I, we were having this conversation earlier. I've got a daughter, I pick her up from school, and I'm a head of HR, right? It shouldn't affect how you're measured at work. So I think it's just really important to have those open conversations, but also to sort of sit with your manager and really talk about where you want to go in your career and how you can find those opportunities in a way that's right for you and the company.
Great. And I know we're at time, but we received a question that I think is really fantastic, and I want to hope we address it. Is how do we equip the people managers when they may feel burnout? And, it's relevant to me, of course, because I just did a training through Monster on how to address burnout so I can then be a better manager for my people too. So I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit more about this.
Yeah, it's really good feedback. And you're right, it's something that we're going through organizationally at Monster. So one of the things which I think is really important, we understand the importance of the influence of managers on how employees are feeling. We cannot expect managers to just know how to deal with this stuff, right? They're humans. Every manager has a different skill. So it's really important, I think, to train them on what to look for, what to do in the event they spot signs of burnout or quiet quitting, and what resources you have available as an organization to support the individual and the manager. I think training is really key, but also giving managers the opportunity to talk to other managers who might be experiencing the same thing. That's also incredibly helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you, everyone who stuck with us over time. We still have over 800 people with us. It's amazing. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, thank you.
This is great. I've got a lot of comments here about how they really enjoyed the chat as well. So when we send out the recording tomorrow, we'll include the chat as well, so you can continue to browse those great comments and recommendations that you had from your peers. Also, in case you were distracted by the chat and you want to listen again to Claire's presentation, we'll have that available for you. So thank you, everyone, for attending today. We really appreciate your time, your enthusiasm, your engagement, and we hope to see you next time for our next webinar. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.